The moment the poison hits my blood, I know exactly what's happening. I just don't understand why nobody in this ballroom is moving to help me. It starts as heat, low in my stomach, the kind you'd mistake for too much wine on an empty stomach if you didn't know better. Then it climbs. My fingers go numb first, then my jaw, then something behind my ribs that feels less like pain and more like being hollowed out from the inside, with a very patient, very precise blade. 300 guests. Golden light. A string quartet still playing like my life isn't currently ending 8 feet away from the dessert table. I grip the edge of the banquet hall's marble railing, and my knees buckle, and the first thought that crosses my mind isn't fear, it's embarrassment. Because I am Adrian Voss, heir to the wealthiest trading house in Aurelis, and I am about to die in front of everyone who has ever smiled at me for money. My vision splits into fractured gold. Somewhere behind me, a woman gasps. Somewhere in front of me, my own father lifts his wine glass a half-inch higher, as if toasting something. My chest catches fire from the inside, and that's when I understand. This wasn't an accident. Someone in this room wanted me dead tonight, and they picked the one night 300 witnesses would watch it happen and do absolutely nothing. I hit the floor before I hear the first scream. 6 hours earlier, none of this seemed possible. I was the golden son of House Voss, the boy who got everything he pointed at, and I liked it that way. I want to be honest with you about who I was, because the version of me standing at that banquet had no idea what was actually inside him. I'd spent 19 years being told I was destined for greatness, and I believed every word of it. Silk shirts I ruined on purpose because new ones were more fun. Servants I never learned the names of. A fiancée I barely spoke to outside of formal dinners. I wasn't cruel, I was just hollow, in the specific way rich, adored children become hollow when nothing has ever cost them anything. Tonight was supposed to fix that. Tonight, at my coming-of-age ceremony, my father would hand me the Voss signet ring, and with it, control of the largest merchant fleet on the eastern coast. 40 ships, 6 trade routes, a seat on the merchant council before I turned 20. Everyone in Aurelis would call me Lord Voss by morning. Everyone except my cousin Garrick, who had wanted that ring since before I was born. Garrick Voss was 7 years older than me, sharper in every way that mattered, and permanently, quietly furious that a title he'd have been better suited for went to a boy who barely showed up to run the ledgers. He never said it out loud. He didn't have to. I caught the look on his face every single time my father praised me, and I ignored it every single time, because ignoring things was the one skill I'd actually mastered. I want to give you one example, because it explains everything about who I was before tonight. 3 months earlier, I'd raced a rented racing skiff through the harbor traffic lanes on a bet, clipped a fishing trawler, and sank 2 crates of a dock worker's entire season's catch. The man stood on the pier shouting at me while I laughed and tossed him a purse fat enough to buy 4 new boats. I never learned his name either. I thought that was generosity. I didn't understand until much later that it was just another way of making sure nothing ever actually touched me. My fiancée stood beside me at the top of the ballroom stairs that night, in a blue gown that matched the House Rourke banners hanging from the rafters. Elizabeth Rourke, betrothed to me since childhood, polite to me my whole life, and never once, not one single time, someone I actually knew. I remembered, standing there beside her, the one time I'd actually tried to talk to her like a real person, years earlier, at a garden party neither of us wanted to attend. She'd asked me what I wanted my life to look like once the wedding was finalized and the merger of our 2 houses was done. I told her, without thinking twice, that I hadn't really considered it, because nothing about my life had ever required me to. She hadn't asked me anything like that again after that. I used to think that meant she'd simply given up on me. I understand now it meant something closer to grief. She handed me my ceremonial cup with both hands, the way tradition demanded. Her fingers were shaking. I didn't notice. Why would I? Nothing had ever gone wrong for me before. To House Voss, my father announced, raising his own glass to the crowd, and to my son. 300 glasses lifted at once. I drank first, because that was tradition too, and the wine tasted like sweet copper for half a second before it tasted like nothing at all. Then my throat closed. I dropped my cup and the crowd read it as a joke, a stumble, a boy who'd already had too much wine before the toast even finished. Laughter actually rippled through the room. That's the part I still can't get past. People were laughing while I was dying. My heart drops the moment I realize no one is going to move. Not the guests, not the guards, not my own father, who is still holding his glass at that same strange, frozen angle, watching me the way you watch something you already expected. I collapse against the railing and slide down it, and the last clear thing I see is Isabet's face. Not smug, not satisfied. Terrified, and looking directly at Garrick, who stands very still near the orchestra, not laughing anymore either. That's when I understand the second thing. She didn't want to do this. Someone made her. My vision goes white at the edges, and the golden ballroom, the banners, the string quartet, all of it folds inward, like a piece of paper closing. I had no choice about any of what happens next. I'm not even conscious for most of it. But somewhere underneath the poison eating through my chest, something old wakes up. Something that has been sleeping inside me for 19 years, waiting for the exact moment I stopped being useful to it. I don't fall into darkness. I fall into memory. There's no ballroom anymore. No banners, no wine, no laughing crowd. Just a gray, endless field, stretching in every direction under a sky the color of a dying coal. I'm standing on it, except I'm not standing the way I was a second ago. I feel taller, heavier, older somehow, in a way that has nothing to do with age. A voice speaks from behind me, and it sounds exactly like mine, except it isn't mine at all. You took your time, it says. 200 years, and you took your time. I spin around and there's no one there. Just the field, and the coal-red sky, and thousands, maybe millions, of shallow depressions in the earth stretching to the horizon. Graves. I'm standing in the middle of a battlefield the size of a kingdom, and every single grave in it belongs to someone I apparently already know. The memories hit like a landslide. I see a war. Not this life's war, some other war, older, colder, fought under a black banner I somehow recognize as mine. I see myself, a different face, a different body, standing on a hilltop while an entire kingdom's worth of soldiers rise from the mud behind me, not as monsters, but as an army that fought and died protecting people who begged for their help. I see the invasion itself, briefly, a horde pouring down out of frozen mountains under a banner none of my memories can name, and I see the living army of that old kingdom breaking against it 3 times, before anyone thought to ask the outcast necromancer camped outside the city walls for help. I remember being asked. I remember saying yes without hesitation, even knowing exactly what it would cost me to be useful to people who'd spent years pretending I didn't exist. I see a king's throne room. I see myself kneeling in it, offering everything I had to save a country from an invasion no living army could survive. I see that same king's face twist from gratitude into horror the moment the war ended, and he realized what I actually was. Necromancer. The word lands in my chest like a second poison. Before the mob, I see one more thing, sharper and quieter than the rest. A woman standing beside me on that hilltop battlefield, armor scorched, a sword she'd stopped needing hours ago still strapped to her back. Watching my army of the risen dead, the way you watch a friend do something you're afraid of, but refuse to let stop you from standing next to them anyway. I don't have a name for her. I only have the feeling of losing her, sharp and immediate, sometime before that stake and that fire, and I understand, without being told, that whatever happened to her is part of why the man who framed me smiled so easily. Somewhere underneath the grief attached to that memory, there's something else too, small and stubborn, a feeling that she isn't entirely gone from the world even now. I don't know what to do with that feeling yet. I just know I'm not ready to let go of it. I see the mob. I see the trial that wasn't a trial. I see a stake and fire and a face in the front row of the crowd, a general's face, smiling in a way that no one who fought beside me should have been smiling. That face burns itself into my memory harder than anything else in the vision, sharp and clear and utterly unfamiliar, and somehow I know, with total certainty, that man is the reason I died the first time. I try to reach for his name, the traitors, certain for one desperate second that it's sitting right there at the edge of my memory, close enough to grab. It slips away instead, dissolving the moment I chase it directly, the way the details of a dream do, the second you try to describe them out loud. You won't get it that easily, the voice says, almost amused now. Names are the last thing to come back. Faces first. Names when you've earned them. Then tell me, I say. To no one. To the empty field. To whatever's left of the man I apparently used to be. I already did, the voice answers. You'll recognize him before he recognizes you. Use that. The field starts to crack apart like drying mud. Light floods in through the gaps, blinding and warm. Nothing like the coal-red sky. And I realize the light isn't part of the memory at all. It's the ballroom chandelier. I open my eyes, and I'm on the floor of my own coming-of-age ceremony. Poison still burning in veins that should have stopped working minutes ago. Except they haven't stopped. My hands aren't the pale, soft hands of a spoiled merchant's son anymore. Black lines are crawling up from my fingertips, tracing my knuckles like ink dropped in water, and every single person in that ballroom takes a step back at once. I should be dead. I know I should be dead. Instead, I'm breathing, and the poison isn't fighting my body anymore. It's dissolving, burning off my skin in thin curls of black smoke, like something in me is simply refusing it. He's alive, someone whispers, and it isn't relief in their voice. It's dread. I push myself up onto one knee, and the nearest guard, a man twice my size in Voss colors, backs into the banquet table so hard the centerpiece shatters on the marble. I don't understand yet why everyone's looking at me like that. I don't understand until I catch my own reflection in the polished silver of a fallen serving tray. My eyes aren't brown anymore, they're black, all the way through, no white left at all, and something about that fact alone drops the temperature of the entire room by 10 degrees. Lord Henrik Dawes, head of a rival trading house that spent a decade losing bids to mine, is the first guest to actually say something out loud, instead of just staring. Well, he says, wineglass still in hand, voice carrying easily across the stunned silence. That certainly explains why House Voss always won every contract it shouldn't have. Nobody laughs, but I catch at least 2 other merchant lords nodding slightly, like a decade of losing to my father's fleet suddenly makes a horrible kind of sense to them. I don't have the energy to feel insulted by it. I'm still trying to understand why my own hands don't look like my hands anymore. Then the birds start falling. There's an aviary along the eastern wall of the ballroom, decorative songbirds kept for the ceremony, and every single one of them drops from its perch at the exact same second, wings folding, bodies hitting the floor of their cages. Then, impossibly, they rise again, small and stiff and wrong, feathers standing at strange angles, tiny black eyes fixed on nothing. I didn't do that on purpose. I didn't do it at all, not consciously. It just happened, the same way breathing happens, because whatever woke up inside me in that gray field is not waiting for my permission anymore. A woman screams the word that ends any chance I had of walking out of that ballroom as anyone's golden son. Necromancer. The word spreads through 300 guests faster than the poison did. In Aurelis, that word isn't an insult. It's a death sentence, older and colder than any law on the books, because the Church of Radiance has spent 2 centuries teaching every single person in this kingdom that necromancy is the one sin the radiant flame never forgives. And standing near the west doors, in the pale robes of a low-ranking church inquisitor, invited only as a formality tonight, a man named Inquisitor Halden goes very, very still. I had no idea, kneeling on that ballroom floor with dead songbirds twitching back to false life above me, that I'd just introduced myself to the exact organization that burned me alive the first time. My father moves first, and for 1/2 second, one stupid, hopeful half second, I think he's coming to help me up. He isn't. Guards, Lord Adrian Voss says, and his voice doesn't shake at all, which somehow hurts worse than if it had. Restrain him. 6 men in Voss livery step forward, and I realize, with a clarity that feels like ice water down my spine, that my own father just ordered his household guard to arrest his own son in front of 300 witnesses, less than a minute after watching me get poisoned at my own inheritance ceremony. That should have solved everything, from his position. It didn't. The first guard reaches for my arm and I don't decide what happens next. My body decides it for me. The shadow beneath his boots ripples, darker than shadow should be able to get, and something under the marble floor answers a call I didn't know how to send. A hand, gray and skeletal and unmistakably not mine, breaks through the tiles and closes around his ankle. He screams and goes down hard, and every guest, still close enough to see it, screams with him. The ballroom breaks into a stampede a half-second later. 300 people who spent the whole night smiling at me, now fighting each other for the exits, gowns tearing, glasses shattering underfoot, a lifetime of practiced noble composure gone in a single heartbeat. Somewhere in the crush, I hear my own name shouted twice, once in horror and once, unmistakably, in something closer to delight, and I don't have time to figure out which voice belonged to which. A hand grabs my shoulder from the other direction, and for one hopeful second, I think someone's actually come to help. It's Percy Aldane, the closest thing I've ever had to a real friend outside of business. Someone I've known since we were both children learning to ride in the same stable yard. He isn't reaching to help me up. He's shoving me away from himself, putting distance between us like I'm something that might be catching. "Stay away from me," Percy says, voice cracking with a fear I've genuinely never heard from him before. Gods, Adrian. Stay away. I want to tell him it's still me. I don't get the chance. And some small, exhausted part of me realizes I probably wouldn't have believed it either, if our positions were reversed an hour ago. I stumble backward, horrified at myself in a way I don't have time to process. And Isabet is suddenly right there, gripping my wrist with both hands, her blue gown torn at the hem from shoving through the fleeing crowd. "Adrian, listen to me," she says, and her voice is shaking so badly, I can barely make out the words. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never wanted—" "You poisoned me," I say. It comes out flatter than I mean it to. I'm still watching black cracks spread across the marble where that hand emerged, still trying to understand what I even am right now. I didn't have a choice. Her eyes dart toward the west doors, toward Inquisitor Halden, who's already speaking low and urgent to 2 church guards flanking him. He said your family's debts would be forgiven. He said it would be painless. He said, "Who?" I demand, and for the first time in my entire spoiled, sheltered life, I actually sound dangerous. She doesn't get to answer. Garrick's voice cuts across the ballroom instead, pitched loud and performative, the voice of a man making very sure everyone remembers exactly where he stood tonight. "He's a necromancer!" Garrick shouts, pointing at me from 20 feet away, safely behind a wall of household guards that used to be mine. He's been hiding this. My uncle's own blood. And he's been hiding this from all of us. I should have known Garrick would turn this into his moment. I should have known the second I saw his face frozen and unlaughing, while everyone else mocked me falling. He didn't look surprised that I was dying. He looked like a man watching a plan complete itself. Big mistake, thinking I was too poisoned to notice that. Inquisitor Halden steps forward, and the temperature in the ballroom seems to drop another 10 degrees just from his presence. Robes bone white, a chain of small silver flames at his throat catching the chandelier light. "By the authority of the Church of Radiance," he says, calm in the specific way that terrifies me more than shouting would have, "the boy is to be taken into custody for necromantic corruption. Living or dead makes no difference to us. Living or dead makes no difference to us." Those words land somewhere very old inside me, and for half a second the gray field flashes behind my eyes again. The stake, the fire, that unfamiliar smiling face in the crowd. I don't know yet who that face belongs to, but I know, suddenly and completely, that I am not staying in this ballroom to find out how this version of the story ends. "Adrian," Isabet whispers, still gripping my wrist. "The servants' passage, behind the kitchens. I can get you to the harbor gate before they close it." "Why would you help me now?" I ask her, and I mean it as an accusation, not a question. Her answer comes out cracked and honest, in a way nothing about tonight has been. "Because I'd rather live with what I did to you than live with what happens to you if you stay." There's no time for the rest of it right then, but she gives me a piece of it anyway, fast and low, like she needs someone besides herself to know it. House Rourke's shipping contracts had been quietly collapsing for 2 years. Debts nobody outside the family knew about. And 3 weeks ago, a man in church robes offered to make all of it disappear in exchange for one favor at my ceremony. She hadn't known what the favor actually was until the night before. By then it was already too late to refuse, without watching her whole family go under instead. I don't have room in my head yet to decide how I feel about that. I file it next to everything else. I don't have time to decide if I believe her. Halden's guards are already moving, and the shattered marble at my feet is still cooling from whatever I just did without meaning to. And my own father is watching all of it, with an expression I can't read at all, somewhere between grief and something that looks disturbingly like relief. Isabet pulls me through a side door before I can ask him which one it is. We don't make it far. The servants' passage behind the kitchens is narrow, low-ceilinged, lit by nothing but the orange glow leaking through the door we just came through, and it dead ends at a locked storage door that Isabet clearly wasn't expecting to be locked. She rattles the handle twice, and I hear boots pounding down the passage behind us, close enough that I can make out Garrick's voice among them, giving orders like a man who's already decided he's the new heir. "He went this way! Take him alive if you can, it doesn't matter if you can't." That last part is the one that gets me moving. I press my palm flat against the locked door out of pure animal instinct. No plan behind it at all, and the wood doesn't open. It rots. 200 years of decay happen in about 2 seconds, the grain going soft and gray and collapsing inward like the door aged a century in a single breath, and Isabet makes a small, strangled sound beside me that isn't quite a scream. "What are you?" she breathes. "I don't know yet," I tell her, and for once in my life, that's the truest thing I've ever said. We stumble through into the wine cellar beyond, and I hear the guards hit the passage behind us, and I know we have seconds, not minutes. Isabet grabs a lantern off the wall, and I grab the first thing my hands land on that isn't wine, which turns out to be an old iron candelabra shaped vaguely like a tree. It's not a weapon, not really. Except when the first guard bursts through the rotted doorway, something underneath the cellar floor answers again, faster this time, easier, like my body is starting to remember a language it hasn't spoken in 200 years. The dirt beneath the flagstones splits, and skeletal hands, dozens of them, punch up through gaps that shouldn't exist in a stone floor, and grip the guard by both ankles before he's even finished drawing his sword. He goes down screaming, and I feel sick and powerful at the exact same time, which is a combination I am nowhere near ready to understand. A second shape drops through the rotted doorway behind him, and this one doesn't hesitate at the sight of skeletal hands. Captain Rainer Holt, head of the Voss House Guard, a man who used to let me win sparring matches when I was 12, and never once told my father I cheated. He's carrying a rune-etched blade I've only ever seen locked in my father's study, the kind forged specifically to cut through raised dead without a second swing. "Stand down, Adrian," Rainer says, and there's no cruelty in it, just exhaustion, like a man doing a job he hates. "I don't want to be the one who does this." "Then don't," I tell him, and I mean it. He doesn't listen. The rune blade catches the lantern light, and one of my risen dock workers drops in a single stroke, bone unraveling into dust that shouldn't be possible from steel alone. I feel it happen somewhere behind my ribs, a small, sick tug, like losing a tooth I didn't know I had. Whatever that blade does, it isn't just cutting flesh, it's cutting the thread connecting me to what I raise. Isabet screams my name, and I duck on instinct as Rainer's second swing passes close enough to part my hair, and the candelabra in my hand becomes the only thing standing between us. Steel meets iron and the impact rings clean through both my arms. I'm not a fighter. I've never had to be. But something underneath the panic remembers how to move anyway, how to read the angle of a blade before it lands. 2 centuries of battlefield instinct riding shotgun, in a body that's never held a real weapon in its life. "There are graves under this house," I say out loud, mostly to myself, mostly in disbelief. "There are graves under this entire estate. Old Voss burial crypt," Isabet says, already pulling me toward a side passage, voice tight with fear that isn't entirely aimed at the guards anymore. 3 generations. "Adrian, what you just did. I know. They're not going to stop hunting you, not after this. Not after Halden saw it happen with his own eyes." She's right, and some small, cynical part of me, the part that spent 19 years assuming problems solved themselves, understands for the first time in my life that this one isn't going to. Rainer comes at me again, and this time I don't raise anything new to stop him. I throw a wine rack instead, ordinary and heavy and entirely mundane, and it buys exactly enough time for Isabet to slam the cellar's iron grate down between us. Rayner's face fills the bars, furious and helpless in equal measure, and for one strange second I actually feel bad for him. "This isn't finished," he shouts through the grate, already working the latch. "It really is, for tonight," I say, and Isabet is already hauling me toward the delivery hatch before he gets it open. We break out of the wine cellar through a delivery hatch into the kitchen gardens, cold night air hitting my face like a slap, and for one second, just one, I actually think we might make it clean to the harbor gate. Behind us, muffled through stone, I can still hear Rayner shouting orders, growing fainter with every step. Then the second problem starts. A figure steps out from between two hedgerows ahead of us, blocking the garden path entirely, and it takes me a full heartbeat to place the face in the dark. Master Oswin, my father's steward for as long as I've been alive, the man who taught me how to ride a horse, and how to hold a ledger, and, apparently, exactly where the family's back gate keys are hidden. He's holding a lantern in one hand, and a set of iron keys in the other, and for one horrible second I brace myself for another betrayal. "Move fast," Oswin says instead, tossing me the keys. "And don't you dare thank me out loud. If anyone asks, I never saw either of you." I freeze for half a second, stunned, and he shoves my shoulder hard enough to get me walking again. "Your father is many things, boy," Oswin mutters, already turning back toward the house. "But I served your grandmother, and she'd skin me alive if I let them burn her grandson without a fight. Go, now." My grandmother, I repeat, because that's the one piece of that sentence I can actually hold on to right now. What does she have to do with any of this? "More than your father ever let her tell you," Oswin says, and for just a second, something old and sad crosses his face. "Ask him yourself if either of us lives long enough for you to get the chance." There's no time to ask what he means by that, or why he says it, like he knows something about my family I don't. That question gets filed away next to the other one, the traitor's face burning behind my eyes, the general who smiled while I burned 200 years ago. Too many open threads for one night. I'm starting to understand that's just what tonight is going to be. The back gate lets out onto the merchant quarter, cobblestones slick with harbor fog, and for a few blocks it actually feels like we've bought ourselves room to breathe. That feeling lasts exactly as long as it takes for the church's warning bells to start ringing from the cathedral spire behind us. A deep, rolling toll that every soul in Aurelis has been trained since childhood to recognize. Necromancer sighted, all citizens to shelter, all inquisitors to arms. "That's for me," I say, and Isabet doesn't answer, because we both already know it is. Shutters slam closed up and down the merchant quarter as we run, whole families disappearing behind bolted doors at the sound of those bells, and I catch one small face pressed against a window we pass, a boy no older than 6, staring at me the way you'd stare at a storm rolling in off the harbor. Not curious, afraid. I used to be the kind of person that same family would have bowed to on the street a week ago. Tonight, I'm the reason they're barring their own front door. That look stays with me longer than I expect it to. A cluster of dockhands spills out of a tavern ahead of us, drunk enough to be brave and sober enough to recognize the word being shouted from every street corner behind us. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a boat hook still in hand, plants himself directly in our path. "That's him," he says, loud enough to draw the rest of the tavern out behind him. "That's the Necromancer from the harbor announcement." "We don't want trouble," Isabet says quickly, stepping half in front of me, and I let her, mostly because I genuinely don't know what happens if I lose my temper twice in one night. Trouble already found this whole street the second he walked into it. The dockhand snaps back, and more of them start fanning out, torches and lanterns, and one crude harpoon, an entire tavern's worth of ordinary, frightened people deciding in real time whether tonight is the night they become a mob. I don't raise anything. I want that on record, because it would have ended the confrontation instantly, and it's the one temptation all night I actually managed to resist without a fight. Instead, I hold both hands up, empty, and let them see exactly how tired and human and terrified I still am underneath whatever I apparently turned into an hour ago. I've never hurt anyone in this city who didn't come at me first, I say, and it's true, and something about saying it out loud steadies me more than I expect. I'm not staying. I don't want your street. I just want to leave. For one long second, nobody moves at all, torchlight flickering across a dozen faces, still deciding whether fear or restraint wins out tonight, and I genuinely have no idea which way it's going to break. It isn't courage that clears our path. It's the boat hook wavering, and one woman near the back pulling her husband's sleeve, murmuring that the harbor gate's the fastest way to be rid of us either way. The dockhand lowers his weapon first, more out of confusion than mercy, and the crowd splits just wide enough for us to slip through without either side deciding to test the other any further. That could have gone very differently, Isabet mutters once we're clear, voice shaking with adrenaline she's clearly been holding back the whole time. Everything tonight could have gone very differently, I say, and we keep moving before either of us has to think about that too hard. We cut through the fish market, empty and reeking at this hour, and that's where the midpoint of my very short night as a fugitive finally catches up with me. 2 church guards step out from the alley ahead, silver flame insignias catching the moonlight, and behind us, boots again, faster this time, more of them. Isabet stops walking. I feel her hand tighten on my sleeve. Adrian, she says quietly, I need you to hear something before this goes any further, because I don't know if I'll get another chance to say it. Garrick didn't act alone. Someone above him arranged everything, the poison, the timing, even the guest list. Someone wanted the church watching the exact moment you'd break. Who? I don't know his name. I only ever saw him once, in Garrick's study, wearing church robes finer than anything a common inquisitor wears. Her eyes flick past me, toward the guards closing in from both directions now, and her voice drops even lower. But I know he wasn't surprised by what you turned into tonight. He looked like he'd been waiting for it. He wore a ring I've never seen on anyone else, a black flame worked in silver, and Garrick wouldn't even look directly at him the whole time they spoke. I file that image away next to everything else I don't have time to understand yet. A black flame in silver, a smile from 200 years ago, a father who apparently already knew what I was before I did. Someone wanted the church watching. Someone who wasn't surprised. The gray field flashes behind my eyes again, unbidden. That same unfamiliar smiling face from 200 years ago, and something cold and furious settles into my chest that has nothing to do with tonight's poison at all. The guards close the distance before I can chase that thought any further, and the fish market turns into the second fight of my life within an hour of my first one. I don't have a plan. I don't have training. What I have is instinct, raw and unfiltered, pouring out of me the way water pours downhill, and the cold stone beneath the fish stalls answers it without me asking twice. Old dockworkers, buried generations back in the paupers' plots beneath the market square, rise in ragged, unhurried silence, not screaming, not monstrous, just moving, with a kind of patient, unstoppable purpose that terrifies the guards far more than violence would have. One guard breaks and runs before a single blow lands. The other doesn't, and he makes the mistake of going for me directly instead of the dead men between us. I see the strike coming a half-second too late, my body still untrained no matter how old the instinct underneath it is, and I brace for a blade that never lands. Isabet gets there first, shoulder into the guard's ribs, sending his sword arm wide, and he backhands her hard enough to drop her against a fish stall. She doesn't get up slow. She gets up furious, grabs a boning knife off the stall behind her, and puts the flat of it across the back of his skull, hard enough to end the argument entirely. I freeze for exactly 1 second, staring at her standing over an unconscious church guard with a stolen knife still in her hand, breathing hard, lips split from where he hit her. Don't look at me like that, she snaps, wiping blood off her mouth with the back of her wrist. I told you I'd rather live with what happens next than with what I already did. I don't have a clever answer for that. For the first time all night, I actually believe her completely. No hesitation left in it at all. I don't order them to hurt anyone. I don't order them to do anything at all, and that's the part that scares me most. Standing in the middle of that fish market, watching dead men clear a path for me on instinct alone. Whatever woke up in that gray field isn't waiting for permission. It's just remembering how this used to work, 200 years and one lifetime ago, and dragging me along behind it. They're not going to stop, Isabet says again, breathless, staring at the dock workers now standing motionless around us like an honor guard. Adrian, this is bigger than tonight. This is bigger than my family or yours. I know, I say, and for the first time since I collapsed on that ballroom floor, I actually believe it. She notices the cut on my forearm from Garrick's earlier swing, only once the dock workers settle, blood already drying dark against my sleeve, and tears a strip from the ruined hem of her gown, without asking permission first. Her hands are steadier now than they were holding that ceremonial cup 6 hours ago, quick and practical, tying the makeshift bandage tight enough to actually matter. This isn't a kindness, she mutters, not quite meeting my eyes. You're not much use to either of us bleeding out before we reach the harbor. Sure, I say, and we both let the lie sit there between us, because neither of us has time to examine it any closer than that. We break for the harbor gate with maybe 20 minutes before the tide turns and the last outbound ship of the night casts off. And that's when the third problem of my night finally catches up to all the others, because Garrick didn't send guards to the harbor. He came himself. He's waiting at the gate with a dozen men and, standing beside him in church white, arms folded, patient as a man who's already won, Inquisitor Halden. End of the road, cousin, Garrick calls out, and there's no performance left in his voice now, just satisfaction. Did you really think House Voss would let a monster wear its name? I stop walking. Behind me, footsteps, the dock workers I raised without meaning to, are still following at a distance, patient and silent, and something in Halden's expression flickers when he counts them. Interesting, Halden says, stepping forward, voice mild in a way that makes my skin crawl. Untrained, uncontrolled, and yet look how naturally it comes to you. He studies me the way you'd study an unfamiliar animal, curious and clinical at once. There's a particular signature to raw necromantic talent, boy. I've felt it exactly once before in my life, and the man who carried it burned for it 200 years ago. Tell me your family history doesn't go back that far. The words land like a physical blow. 200 years. He knows something. He knows more than a low-ranking church inquisitor, invited to a merchant's party, has any business knowing. What do you know about him? I ask, and I don't bother hiding how much I need the answer. Halden smiles, and it's not a kind smile at all. More than you, apparently, which is going to make tonight very educational for both of us. That's the reversal I don't see coming until it's already happening. Garrick draws his sword. 12 guards fan out around the harbor gate, and Halden raises one hand, palm out, and the silver flame chain at his throat ignites into real fire that doesn't flicker in the wind at all. The dock workers behind me shift closer without me asking. An honor guard turned front line in the space of a single breath. I had no idea, walking into that ballroom 6 hours earlier expecting nothing more dangerous than a boring speech and a new ring, that I'd end the night cornered at a harbor gate by an inquisitor who apparently watched my last life burn. Take him, Halden says, calm as ever, and let's see exactly what he's carrying. The fight that follows isn't clean, and it isn't controlled, and it isn't anything close to what I imagine the Grave King, whoever he really was, could once do without breaking a sweat. But it's mine, drawn out of 2 centuries of buried instinct with nothing but panic and fury to guide it. And for the first time all night I stop trying to hold it back. The harbor square cracks open beneath a dozen unmarked sailors' graves, forgotten men lost to storms and debts and bad luck, and they rise around me in a rough circle, not an army, just enough. Garrick's guards break formation immediately, and even Garrick himself takes an involuntary step backward, sword shaking in his hand. I don't kill anyone. I want you to understand that, because it would have been easy, standing there with that much power finally let loose, and some small, stubborn part of me, the part that still remembers being a spoiled, careless boy who never hurt anyone on purpose, refuses to let 200 years of rage make that decision for me. I bind them instead, hands and ankles, dead grips gentle enough to hold and firm enough to break nothing. Garrick doesn't wait for his men to recover. He comes straight at me himself, sword raised, and for one strange second, I see 19 years of quiet resentment finally boil over into something honest. You were never even supposed to be born, he snarls, swinging hard enough that I feel the wind off the blade. My father built half this house's fortune, and your father got the title anyway. And I was supposed to just smile and wait for scraps from a boy who couldn't run a fish stall without help. So you poisoned me instead of asking for a raise, I say, ducking his second swing, and something about how ridiculous that sounds out loud almost makes me laugh even now. He doesn't find it funny. His third swing connects, a shallow line across my forearm that stings more than it should, and that's the first time tonight I bleed like an ordinary person instead of leaking black smoke. Pain clears something in my head, sharp and immediate, and the dead sailor nearest to Garrick moves without me consciously calling it, wrapping both arms around him from behind before the blade can come a fourth time. Garrick thrashes against a dead man's grip, more humiliated than hurt, and I feel that same sick tug behind my ribs I felt when Raynor's rune blade cut one of my risen loose, except this time it's costing me on purpose, holding one grown man still with borrowed strength that has to come from somewhere inside me to keep working. My legs go unsteady underneath me. I didn't know that part yet, that every second I hold the dead here costs something real of my own. Let him go, Halden says, watching all of it with clinical interest instead of alarm. And let's see how long you can actually keep doing that. I let Garrick go rather than answer that question, and the moment I do, my knees nearly buckle from the strain of it, a cost I still don't have words for yet. Garrick scrambles backward into the ring of his own guards, sword forgotten, and for the first time tonight he looks genuinely afraid of me instead of just resentful. Halden is the only one who doesn't run, and the only one who doesn't need to. He meets my risen dead with fire that burns clean through bone, methodical, unbothered, and for the first time all night I understand exactly how outmatched I actually am. This man has fought necromancers before. This man has burned one at a stake before, whether it was 200 years ago or not, and every motion he makes tells me he's not remotely worried about a 19-year-old who woke up with these powers 6 hours ago. I throw everything I have left at him anyway. Every grave within reach of the harbor square answers at once. More than I meant to call. More than I can actually hold steady. And for one blinding, ugly second it feels good. Feels like the 2 centuries of fury underneath my skin, finally getting to speak for itself instead of me. Halden doesn't even step back. He simply raises both hands, and the fire that pours out of him this time isn't a blade anymore. It's a wave, and it unravels half of what I raised in a single pass like tearing wet paper. The backlash drops me to one knee, and something in my chest feels hollowed out in a way that scares me more than any of the guards did. There it is, Halden says quietly, almost gently, watching me fight to stay upright. That's the part they never warn you about. Every grave you call answers with a piece of you attached to the string. Pull too many strings at once, boy, and you won't need a stake. You'll simply run out. You talk like you've watched this happen before, I say, forcing myself back to my feet. The Order of the White Flame wasn't founded to fight monsters, boy. Whatever the sermons tell you, Halden says, and for the first time all night, something almost like weariness crosses his face. It was founded specifically to fight men exactly like you, because 200 years ago, one of you nearly became a king instead of a corpse. We've spent every year since making sure that mistake doesn't happen twice. The gray field flickers behind my eyes again at that, faint and fast. A throne room. A crown offered and refused. I don't have time to chase it. Halden is already moving again. You're strong, Halden says, closing the distance between us with terrifying patience. But you're untrained, undisciplined, and completely alone. That combination gets necromancers killed faster than any church blade ever could. Then teach me, I snap back, mostly out of desperation, and something flickers across his face that isn't quite what I expect. Not hatred, something closer to recognition. I don't teach monsters, he says. I remember them. That's a different job entirely. Garrick, humiliated and desperate to salvage something from the wreckage of his own plan, grabs Isabet by the arm before I register he's moved at all. She helped him escape, he shouts, dragging her toward Halden. She's complicit, take her instead if the boy won't yield. Isabet doesn't scream. She fixes her eyes on mine instead, steady even with Garrick's grip bruising her arm, and shakes her head once, small and fierce, a clear and unmistakable "don't you dare." I dare anyway. Every grave still within my reach answers at once, no restraint left in me at all. Dirt and stone tearing open across the entire harbor square, in a ring wide enough to swallow Garrick's remaining men whole. I don't check whether it's too much. I don't care whether it costs me everything I have left. For one terrifying second, I understand exactly how easy it would be to stop being careful. To let 200 years of buried fury finish what it started the first time it was betrayed by people it tried to save. And that thought scares me worse than Halden's fire does. Garrick releases Isabet on pure instinct, staggering backward from the wall of risen dead now surrounding him, and I force myself to stop there, right at the edge, before the small, stubborn part of me that still remembers being nobody's monster loses the argument completely. Halden watches the whole exchange with something unreadable crossing his face. Not quite approval, not quite alarm. "Interesting," he says again, quieter this time. "You could have taken all of them, you didn't." "I'm not him yet," I say, not entirely sure who I mean. He raises his hand for a final strike, fire gathering bright enough to turn the whole harbor gate the color of dawn, and that's the exact moment my father arrives. Lord Adrian Voss comes through the harbor crowd at a dead run, still in his ceremony robes, and for one confused second I think he's finally come to arrest me himself and finish what he started in that ballroom. He doesn't. "Halden, stand down," my father says, and his voice carries an authority I've genuinely never heard from him before, not the practiced tone of a merchant lord, something older and heavier underneath it. "Not here. Not like this." Halden doesn't lower his hand. "Lord Voss, your son is—" "I know exactly what my son is," my father says, and every single word of it lands on me like ice water. "I've known since the day he was born, since the midwife found the mark on his shoulder, and half the household staff wanted him drowned in the harbor before he turned 1 week old. I've had that mark my entire life, a thin, pale scar shaped like a closed eye just below my collarbone, and I always assumed it was a birth defect nobody bothered explaining to me. Nobody ever did explain it. Apparently nobody ever planned to. That sentence rearranges everything I thought I understood about my own life in about 2 seconds, and I don't get more than that to process it, because Halden's expression shifts from clinical curiosity into something sharper, more dangerous. "Then you've been harboring necromantic bloodline knowingly for 19 years, Halden says slowly, which makes this considerably more interesting than a single rogue heir. "Say what you need to say to the council," my father answers, stepping between us fully now, unarmed and somehow immovable anyway. "But you will not burn my son in a harbor square tonight." He turns to me for the first time all night like I'm actually his son, and not a liability standing in a harbor square. "Your grandmother knew what you'd become before you were ever born," he says, fast, low, like a man handing over everything he can afford to say before he runs out of time to say it. "She made me swear to protect you from this exact night for as long as I could. I failed. I'm sorry I failed. Go, Adrian. Live long enough to be angry with me about it later." It's the first time in my entire life he's said my name like it belonged to a person instead of an heir. I should have known there wasn't going to be a clean rescue in any of this. My father buys me maybe 10 seconds, not out of some sudden reversal into loving parent, but because whatever he's known since the day I was born apparently matters more to him than either the church's approval or Garrick's ambitions. 10 seconds is enough. Isabet grabs my wrist again, hauling me toward the last outbound ship still tethered at the far end of the dock, its crew already scrambling at the sound of church bells. I look back once, at my father standing his ground against an armed inquisitor, at Garrick's face twisted somewhere between fury and disbelief, and at Halden, who is watching me go with an expression far too calm for a man who just lost his target. "This isn't over," Halden calls out, not shouting, not needing to. "Whatever you are, boy, the church remembers your kind better than you remember yourselves. Ask your father what he's really been protecting all these years. Ask him whose face was in the front row 200 years ago." That last line hits me harder than anything the poison did. Isabet drags me up the gangplank as the crew casts off, and I collapse against the ship's railing, chest heaving. black lines still crawling faintly under my skin, watching Aurelis shrink into fog and harbor lights behind us. My father shrinks with it, a small, unmoving shape on the dock, not chasing the ship, not calling out, just watching me leave the same way he watched me collapse at that ballroom 6 hours ago. The ship's captain, a weathered woman named Marin who clearly wasn't expecting her last passengers of the night to arrive, with black veins and a dockside riot behind them, plants herself in front of us before we've even caught our breath. "I don't run cargo for necromancers," she says flatly, one hand resting on a belt knife she hasn't drawn yet. "I don't run anything," I say, and I'm too exhausted to make it sound like anything but the truth. 6 hours ago, I didn't even know what that word meant. Marin studies me for a long moment, glancing once at Isabet's split lip, once at the harbor bells still tolling behind us, and something in her expression shifts from suspicion into something closer to grim calculation. "Church coin doesn't spend as well as it used to along this coast," she says finally. "You can ride as far as Calmarsh. After that, you're someone else's problem." She walks off without waiting for thanks, barking orders at her crew, and I let myself breathe for what feels like the first time all night. One of her deckhands, younger than me and clearly unnerved by the whole arrangement, keeps glancing back at me as he coils rope near the mast, like he's waiting for the black lines under my skin to do something worse than sit there quietly. I don't blame him for it. An hour ago, I would have looked at someone like me exactly the same way. Isabet slides down the railing to sit beside me, knees pulled up, the boning knife from the fish market still clutched loosely in one hand, like she's forgotten to let go of it. Neither of us looks much like the two people who stood at the top of those ballroom stairs a few hours ago, and I don't think either of us wants to be those people again anyway. "Whatever's waiting in Calmarsh," she says quietly, "it's not going to be simple either, is it?" "Nothing about tonight has been simple," I answer, and for the first time since the poison hit my blood, something that isn't quite a laugh escapes me. Small, tired, disbelieving. Isabet almost smiles back, and for one strange, fragile second, sitting on the deck of a stranger's ship with a dead king's memories bleeding into my own, it almost feels like we might actually be on the same side now. Neither of us says anything else for a while. The city keeps shrinking behind us, torchlight and cathedral bells fading into a single dim smear against the dark, until there's nothing left of Aurelis at all, except the cold, and the fog, and the sound of the hull cutting through open water. I don't know yet who betrayed me tonight. Not fully. I don't know who ordered the poison, or who Isabet saw in Garrick's study wearing church robes finer than any common inquisitor deserves, or why my own father has apparently spent 19 years hiding what I actually am instead of simply telling me. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. Sitting on the deck of a stranger's ship with a dead king's memories bleeding into my own, and an entire kingdom's church now hunting my name. Somewhere out there, wearing a face I'll recognize the second I see it again, is the man who watched me burn once already. I look down at my own hands, still faintly threaded with black beneath the skin, and understand something I'm not ready to say out loud yet, not even to Isabet. The spoiled, hollow boy who walked into that ballroom 6 hours ago died at that ceremony exactly like he was supposed to. Whatever's left standing on this deck instead isn't fully him anymore, and it isn't fully whoever the Grave King used to be either. It's something in between, something new, and I have absolutely no idea yet which half of me is going to win. Ahead of us, past the fog and the last dying glow of Aurelis behind the ship, the horizon is completely dark and completely unknown, and for the first time in my entire spoiled, sheltered life, I don't hate that feeling at all. And this time, I'm not planning on giving him the chance to finish the job. Let's get to 600 likes, and Chapter 2 goes live.